Hi, my name is Maisha Mahmood, and I'm going to talk about an invasive species commonly known as the Burmese python. Burmese python are one of the six biggest kinds of snakes in the world and were brought to the US by some pet traders from Southeast Asia. They are carnivores, and like most other reptiles, they eat mostly mammals and birds. These reptiles can be 16 to 23 feet long and weigh up to 200 pounds. Usually, a Burmese python can live for 20 to 25 years. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about some facts and features about this invasive species that has been a terror to a lot of Americans. My discussion includes their physical adaptations, behavioral adaptations, life history traits, dispersal mechanisms and patterns, carrying capacity and population growth, biotic and abiotic barriers, economic and ecological impact, and management strategies. Like most of the invasive species, the Burmese python has undergone some physical and behavioral adaptations over time. We can see quite a few physical adaptations like camouflage, hinged jaws, Jacobson's organ, pit organ, and slow digestion. Their coloration allows them to camouflage easily in the wild habitat, which helps them to hide from human hunters or suddenly attack their prey. After that, their hinged jaws help them to swallow their prey as a whole by stretching the jaw grip and expanding their body. Moreover, they have an organ named Jacobson's organ that gives them a strong sense of smell. When they rub their tongues on the organ, it judges the smell and gives them a good idea about the ambience. Other than that, these pythons have another organ named pit organ that helps them with temperature sensing. The organs are situated below the scales over their upper lips and let the python locate warm-blooded prey at cold temperatures. Their fifth physical adaptation is slow digestion. These pythons do not need to eat every day because they usually feed on large animals. After eating one large prey, they relax under the sun and digest their food for a few days. Next, we can also see some behavioral adaptations in these invasive species. Burmese python often climbs on branches by their prehensile tails and suspends themselves. This helps them to prey on organisms on both tree and the ground. This reptile is a great swimmer and can stay underwater for almost half an hour. In fact, they are known to be the best swimmer among snakes. Although they are nocturnal in nature, they do pretty well in the daytime. And lastly, like most of the snakes, they hibernate during winters. A Burmese python reaches sexual maturity around 2 to 3 years old and they're ready to lay eggs 3 to 4 months after the mating seasons. They can lay an average of 50 eggs up to 100 eggs every year in spring times. After that, they remain with their eggs for 2 to 4 months for incubation. The Burmese python is native to Southeast Asia, mostly from eastern India to Indonesia. This reptile is now known to be an invasive species invading much of Everglades National Park in Florida. Although no one knows exactly how they came to the US, some people believe it was a result of pet trading. A theory suggests that Hurricane Andrew, that devastated South Florida in 1992, went over a small town in Miami where a breeder's facility was completely destroyed, and all the Burmese pythons escaped into the wild. According to some estimates, around 1,000 pythons got loose that day. A Burmese python in the wild can reproduce faster than most other snakes do. Hence, some pythons in the loose can become a great headache within a few years. Something that happened to Florida. Within the year 2000, the first problematic pythons were discovered, and the government realized they needed to take action. According to USGS, their population in the Everglades can be estimated to anywhere between 5,000 to 100,000, and without control, the number will continue to increase. Carrying capacity refers to the maximum population size that the available resources can support. If a population with a few individuals start to live in an ideal, unlimited environment, there will be no limit to the growth of that population. But in reality, we can see some other factors that work that make the resources limited. Due to that, almost every population on Earth has a certain carrying capacity that they can't extend. In the case of the Burmese pythons, they are still they are still in a favorable environment and are growing at a constant rate in the time since there are no predators except human hunters. When this happens, the population usually has exponential population growth, and so does this killer reptile. We can see from this graph that Burmese python population in Florida has increased by a certain number almost every year. It is estimated that around 1,000 pythons were set loose in the wild in 1992, and the number may have increased to almost 100,000 in recent days. If this continues, soon there will be more than 300,000 living in the Everglades Park. Although we do not know the exact carrying capacity of this species, we can say that it is near since there won't be enough resources available for the pythons in a few years. Often, the ability of a species to survive and is reduced by its interaction with other species like predators or herbivores. The Burmese python is not an exception. The only predators these pythons have are human hunters. These reptiles are mostly hunted for their skins. Some of them are used in pet trades, but in Florida, human hunters are on the lookout for the pythons to save other species in the Everglades Park. Humans are a biotic barrier because they are leading a role in reducing the snake's population. Other biotic barriers can be diseases like stomatitis and inclusion body disease. Stomatitis is also known as mouth rot, which usually begins with an injury that might be caused during preying. That injury gets infected with bacteria or fungus, and the tissues of the mouth rot. Without treatment, it's hard for the pythons in the wild to survive with this disease. The inclusion body disease is one of the most serious, contagious, and incurable diseases a python can have. It affects the captive specimens of the snake and can take up to a year to show symptoms. So, we can guess why these diseases are biotic barriers of the Burmese python. Abiotic barriers are natural causes like temperature, water, salinity, sunlight, oxygen, etc., that might limit a species' distribution. Salinity and temperature are some of the main abiotic barriers of Burmese python. These reptiles do well in warm temperatures around 85 to 88 degrees Fahrenheit. Hence, freezing weather turns out to be deadly for them. They usually have trouble eating and digesting food in winter, which may lead to the untimely death of the pythons. Burmese pythons always prefer to live in fresh water with zero salinity. Though high salinity makes it difficult for them to survive, they can still be fine in lower salinity waters. However, if other factors get mixed up with the salinity, it might turn out to be dangerous for them pretty soon. In places where Burmese python is an invasive species, like in the Everglades Park, these pythons are killing protected and native species that have been known to draw tourists. This is having a huge negative impact on Florida's economy. So, to kill the snakes, the state has to hire hunters with an um, $8.15 per hour pay rate to look for them in the park. These hunters get a $50 bonus for every python of at least 4 feet and $25 for each foot beyond. An additional $200 is paid to them if they manage to eliminate a python with its eggs. Like that, Florida State has to spend around $80,000 each year to these pythons. The cost can go higher if the hunters manage to find multiple pythons. In the recent days, the researchers and scientists are coming up with new inventions to find the pythons easily. That's taking them more than the average cost. Burmese pythons are apex predators that can feed on large mammals or other organisms without any trouble. Hence, ever since these snakes invaded South Florida, there has been a decline in the population of the native species. According to a study in 2012, population of possums have dropped by 98.9%, raccoons 99.3%, and bobcats 87.5% since 1997. Moreover, con- contained rabbits, marsh rabbits, and foxes have heavily disappeared. About 20% of South Florida is home to native panther species. They live in the forest and feed on other carnivores. However, due to the increased number of Burmese pythons, there has been some scarcity of food for the panthers because the pythons are feeding on their prey. That may limit the number of panthers in the region. If this continues, the entire food web in the Everglades Park might restructure in the future. The state government has been taking a lot of initiatives to eradicate the Burmese pythons from the Everglades Park. To do that, researchers has come up with a few management strategies, and the Judas snake approach is one of them. In this technique, the hunters focus on removing large reproductive females that will slow down the python population growth. Large male pythons are caught, implanted with radio transmitters, and released back to where they were captured from. After that, biologists use the radio transmitters to find the snake. Because multiple male pythons may find and court female pythons during the mating season, these Judas snakes lead researchers to other pythons, including large females, before they have the chance to produce more pythons. With this approach, the results are promising till now, and the hunters have been able to catch several large reproductive females. A downfall of using this method is that the females are receptive to mating for a long time, which makes it less effective. However, researchers are working on this by implanting the males with female hormones along with radio transmitters. Python sniffing dogs are a new management strategy applied by the state government. In this method, detector dogs are trained to find Burmese pythons by sniffing the area. These dogs use scent signals and alert their handlers when they spot a python. This method makes python searching a lot easier and the dogs are accurate most of the time. However, sometimes it's really hard to locate a python due to its color even though the dog can sense one around. The Interagency Python Management Plan is a new strategy invented by some scientists to control Burmese pythons more effectively. In this plan, they will be using a chemical that mimics the pheromone produced by a female python, which will be a bait to bring out the snakes to the hunters. The researchers hope this will be one of the best strategies to control Burmese python in the Everglades Park. The best thing about this strategy is that when it works, it will successfully bring out the snakes without having to track them. However, the trick is to make the chemical work. Researchers are still struggling to find the perfect formula for this. This concludes my presentation on Burmese python. This invasive species has been spreading rapidly since the beginning and should be controlled in order to save native species. That being said, if anyone ever spots a Burmese python nearby, they should note down their location, report it while moving out of the place immediately. Unless you are a hunter, this is the best thing you can do as a dutiful citizen. These are my reference slides, and this is the peer-reviewed reference slide. Thank you very much.